who consistently use, yeah. So what you do with this idea of code switching, and I got another handout. I don't want to inundate you with handouts all over, but I'm going to show you another handout in just a second. That contrastive analysis approach that I mentioned earlier. Take samples of the kids' writing. So you have samples, you're basically a researcher, and you see, oh, so here's the word, they're all struggling with this saucine. You take literally their words and have them up on the screen. You may not say, Torian, this is your example, but here's something I see you struggling with. Here's a sentence the way you say it, the way you write it. Here's a sentence in standard American English. Can you see the differences in that? So going back to that list we made earlier of here are the times that you can use your home language in school. Here are the times you need to use standard American English. So it's something about students being able to make that connection, not just being told, no, that's not the right way to do it. This is the way to do it. But being able to make a connection. Think about when you're learning another language. You automatically connect it to what you already know. And you say, okay, I know, cat in this language, and then I'm going to make that connection to what I already know. So they need to have something to sort of connect it to. Seeing it side by side makes that. I was telling you earlier how when we look at the research in that corrective approach, where teachers in elementary school say, no, that's not the way you say it. Teachers in middle school say, no, that's not the way you write it. Teachers in high school say, no, and they still do it. When they have that contrastive analysis approach, something clicks. And now I'm not saying that this is every single kid would, but what we see in the research is that it increases their ability to do that code switch. So what I would do is just to literally side by side. There is a great book, and it has actual lessons. It's called Code Switching. Code Switching. Wheeler is the author, Wheeler, and I can't remember. Rebecca Wheeler. But it has specific lessons. She's a professor, but she did this research with, I think it was a third grade teacher. Yes, because that's where I got the example from. That was a real example. The math, Miss Swords, why you be teaching math in the afternoon. She pulled that from her classroom and what she used to do, and she saw a complete turnaround once she introduced this form. And so it's called code switching, and then there's a colon after it, something. Thank you. And it's Wheeler, and who's the other person? And Swords. Oh, and Swords. Yes, Swords. So it's a very teacher-friendly book, and that it has specific lessons that you can do with the children to practice this idea of contrastive analysis and code switching. It is. I like that. It is. It's validating and we said that that's what being culturally responsive is all about. You're not saying that I disregard the knowledge that you bring to the classroom. I like that. But I can appreciate what you have to offer, and I want to help you move further. Teachers always, and I'm surprised nobody has, teachers always kind of buck up at this because you think, but my job is to teach them the right way to do it. Anybody feel like that? Like you want them to know the right way. So it's, teachers often struggle with this. Can I let them say it the wrong way? And can I let them write it the wrong way? Right. Yeah. And I know it's hard because you see, as your purpose in teaching is to move them on. But it definitely works to provide them that additional support. Right. It is, but I had a professor, and this was when I was in undergrad. She bucked that standard American English because she thought even that it does. That's a great point. Yeah, she called it edited American, but that's what she would say. But in most of what you see will be that SAE for standard American English. But you will see, and thank you for raising that point, you will see the dialects referred to as different things. Like I said, African American English, African American Vernacular English, Southern English, Southern American English. So there's different words that are used to describe those. So still looking at the Southern Appalachian dialect, this is one that people can sometimes relate to. The number 5, the double modals. I might ride my bike to school. I might could ride my bike to school, is how you would say that in Southern Appalachian dialect. So before I look at some of the African American English ones, what did that feel like? What was that experience like when I gave you that paper? Torian asked for an example. I wouldn't give you an example, and I just said, okay, now interpret it. Right, right. So what roadblocks are we setting up? And how often do you do that? How often do you give kids something where, maybe it's the daily oral language in the morning where they have to translate or do something, make this correct English, and they do it, and then you say, now that doesn't sound right, does it? Well, to them it probably does sound right. That's why they wrote it that way, because that's the way they hear it. And so being more specific and, again, making those connections. Did I see a hand? Yes. Love it, love it. So I would just go over a couple of the African American English ones. So the possessive S marker, you probably hear this. So Bob's friend, you drop that possessive in the S because you don't need it because it's in front of Bob, so you know it's Bob's friend. It's Bob's friend. Past tense ED marker. So typically in African American English, if it has that marker that in front, the yesterday, well, you know it happened in the past. So then you don't need to add ED to the end. So it's yesterday she played. Another example, the plural S marker, number 4, 3 books. So, and you see this this is one that actually goes through both of the Southern Appalachian dialect and African American English. The 3 or the number lets you know that it's more than one. So then you don't have to add that plural ending to the end. So, and I'm not going to go in too much detail with this because, again, we always talk a lot and I enjoy it. But see how having some sense, some knowledge, understanding of why it may be said that way can help you in terms of making those translations. So I want you to go back and let's actually do this together. Look at a couple of the sentences and see if, based on what you now know or based on your little handout there, if you might be able to translate the sentences. So let's look at number 1 in the Southern Appalachian dialect, which in standard English says the tomato plant grew 2 inches in 1 week. How might you say that in Southern Appalachian dialect? I like it. My tomatoes grow 2 inches in a week. What about number 2? He finally came off the field to the sidelines. I heard it. It it has to do with that verb. Come. Yeah, he come off because of that uninflected simple past. So that come instead of came, kind of like what Torian was saying with the scene saw. All right, let's look at a couple from the African American English. So yesterday the boy walked home from school. Someone translate that for me into African American English. Walk. And we don't need that ED there because we have that past tense ED marker, the yesterday. How about number 2? Sally gave me $3 to buy a book. $3. Yeah, so you don't need that S marker on the end. And there are other ways. I was focusing on one rule in each sentence, and so there are other ways that you could have, but I didn't want to make it too complex. But I give you that example just to show you how kids feel when you give them something and you say to them that you want them to translate that or make this standard American English if that's not their first dialect. I need to get those colored sheets back, but I will put that form if you want it or need it on the Dropbox. But you'll have access to. Oh, that's okay. That's fine. Which one was that? Oh, yes. John Brother Tall. You're right. That's it. John Brother Tall. I was thinking back to what Debbie said earlier about validating their language. I don't remember where I was, but I was talking about Southern Appalachian dialect, and the person that I was talking to um, felt they were saying, I'm going to tell my mom that I did, because the mom was really concerned because they had the Southern drawl, and she just felt so, I can't remember the context of the situation, validated is basically like what Debbie said. She felt validated that she wasn't just wrong, but that there were rules to why she spoke the way she spoke. Just one last handout, and then I'm going to move on. Hopefully I can get to a couple other of our elements of classroom teaching. But this shows you, and this is from that book, the book that I told you about, I forgot the name just that quick. I told you the name. Code switching book. Yes. And so they take a look at how the language that you use associated with students, written in oral language, how that makes a difference. So on the left-hand side, you see anything associated with a more traditional classroom. In Miss Swart's classroom that we saw on the board, the one that the students are only allowed to speak the standard American English. So it looks at them from a deficit model in terms of how can I fix what you have. Not how can I use the resources that you bring to the classroom, but how can I fix, as opposed to how can I add to your repertoire? How can I give you another dialect and make you multi-dialectal? And then the bottom chart looks at how we're actually viewing our students' written and oral communication. So the left-hand side uses that red pen correctionist approach versus code switching. So teachers who have that mindset of this is right and this is wrong see what the students are doing as either good or bad, black or white, basically. And teachers who are using this contrastive approach see what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So just like we said, in this environment, it's okay to speak this way. In this one, maybe not. So just the way you look, those words right or wrong, correct or incorrect, as opposed to following a pattern or varying by settings. I just wanted to give you this because this is a visual reminder of how we approach our discussion, something that could be good if you're conferencing with students in terms of their writing. Any other comments about the code switching and students' language? It just doesn't work. Just hasn't been successful. But it is controversial. And I see it even when I talk to teachers, like I was saying before. I'm surprised nobody, like usually there's a couple people who are like, but I don't think I like this, because I want my kids to know standard American English. So it is. Well, it's almost lunchtime, and we're on number 2 of 7. Hey, let me do one more, and then I'll at least feel like I'm close to halfway through. But I love the discussion. I do. Oh, this will be an easy one because you talked about this with Heather this morning. So the third component of a culturally responsive literacy classroom is this idea of your instructional materials. So you talked about this. In fact, you did the activity with this, so I won't spend a lot of time with it. But just being aware of what the content of the literature that you use, the text that you use, if those are songs or scripts or whatever it may be, how relevant that is to the students. And it makes a big difference. I think back to growing up, I was a very avid reader. I was an only child, so reading was what I did. And I read and read and read and read and read. And then I was probably like 8th or 9th grade, and one of my cousins went to Howard, which is, that's where Cheryl's son, prominent HBCU in Washington, D.C., and I went to go visit her, and they had these people out selling stuff. So it was like sorority stuff, but there was this book table. So, I like to read. I'm at the book table. And again, I'm 8th or 9th grade. This is my spring break. I'm going to visit my cousin. And there was this book, never forget it, Disappearing Acts, Terry McMillan. And that book is like this. It's thick. I fell in love. The book had characters like me. They sounded like me. They did this. They went to church and they did this and they did some other stuff too. But they were characters I could relate to. That was the first time in my whole life I'd ever picked up a book and I mean, I had books galore, and any book you want. I'd never had a book that had a character that looked like, never had a book that I could relate to. I read that whole book, and it's an easy book to read. It is thick, but I read that whole book, you know, in a couple of days, and I was like, can we go back to that place? Because I was so connected. And imagine, you know, kids not having that experience. And I know we do a lot better job now because there are more um, authors of that we can connect with, that write books now. But there's a stat that I'll have to show y'all that after the break. But kids need to make those connections with characters that look like them, and not just the ones who are the athletes or the cooks or whatever they may be. I have a list, and I'm gonna put in the Dropbox too, that I wanted to share with you of. It has Asian American authors, Latino, Native American, African American authors of children's books, because even though there's been lots of improvement, the percentage of books written by authors of color is still very, very low.